Welcome to Live at 9. Sometimes you just kind of have a little bit of more of a difficult time getting started. So that's kind of me today. Although it's a good day, my son's birthday's today, so it's always exciting. Let's see, who is our very first person to join? Nellie, you are our very first person. You barely beat Katina. Sorry, Katina, you are edged out just by maybe a split second today. So congratulations, Nellie. You're our first winner. Really, we have no prizes because I have absolutely no budget for this. So all I can say is good morning and great, you're first. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well today. I'm going to kind of hang out and wait till a few more people start showing up. What I've noticed, I've been reading the blogs and kind of paying attention to a lot of my minister friends, and a lot of us are doing this. We're trying to connect with our people in unique ways, and one thing I'm learning is that people are judging me by what's on my bookshelf. So I'm looking at my bookshelf thinking, man, I really need to rearrange this thing. So maybe I'll try to rearrange my bookshelf so that you can kind of see exactly what it is I'm reading at the moment, because what I'm reading is actually over there on the top and in the third section. Those are some books that I'm actually ongoing, and some books on my desk too. It's neither here nor there. All right, well, everybody's here. I guess I'll go ahead and begin. Hope everybody's doing well. It is I would say, beautifully overcast day on April 1st here in 2020. So we're talking about story this week, talking about the importance of our story. And what I wanted to kind of start off with is that sometimes stories are rough. I love to do woodworking. That's one of the things I really love to do. And I like to, in ministry, it's kind of hard because there are certain things that you spend your time doing, but you may not see the results of any of it. We do a lot of speaking, a lot of listening, and a lot of planning, and sometimes you don't really see the results. You don't really see the finished product. And so that's why I love to woodwork. I love to make things. I've made headboards and benches, and I love to do trim work in the house and things. But I love it because you start and then you finish. I love to see the finished product. One of the things that I really like to do, although it is kind of messy, is I love to sand. I love to just make things smooth, because there's nothing like feeling a piece of 2x4 or 1x4 or some nice edges when they're just smooth. I just love that feeling. And I love the smell of wood that's been cut or sanded. There's just something about that just makes me happy, But sometimes there's rough edges, and you have to sand them down. You got to find a way to make them smooth. And honestly, sometimes with some wood, it's just almost impossible to get their rough edges off. Sometimes you just have to live with the rough edges. And sometimes people are like that. There's a lot of people that are kind of, I would say, a lot of people who have rough edges. I'm one of those. I've got some rough edges. And I know some people that are dear friends of mine, they have some rough edges. Now, one thing I do spend a lot of time doing, especially over my career, not lately, is funerals. And it's always interesting at funerals because either the preacher doesn't really know the person, and so they'll just kind of talk generally, and then in my tradition, the way I grew up, they really didn't really want to speak about the person. They just wanted to give you the plan of salvation. And so however funerals have been in your life, however you've seen those, what we've all probably noticed is that there are lots of times whenever they talk really well about the person that is in the one that we're eulogizing. They have these grand stories, and they almost paint these people very heroically. There was a funeral I was going to several years ago, and it was a guy that I knew and I liked for the most part, but he he kind of liked me, but not really. And I saw the rough edges of this guy. And so when they're talking and telling stories, all these people they're telling these great, grand, almost angelic stories about the kindness and sensitivity and loving nature of this man. And I leaned over the guy next to me and I said, "Who are they talking about?" And he says, "I don't know, because this is not the guy that I knew." And I said, "Yeah, I don't know this person." So I felt like I missed out because I didn't know that guy. And what I always tell people is that I say, I think that there's something about letting our humanity show whenever we are being eulogized. It's okay to tell people about our faults. It's okay to tell them about some of the things we struggled with. Because, really, if you see the story of somebody who has never struggled, then can you really relate to it? I mean, you may want to aspire to be that, but it's unrealistic. And so as we look at what God does in humanity, he does some of his best work in the middle of the mess, in the middle of those people's lives that have rough edges. Now, there's one story that I wanted to bring up. And so if you look at Hebrews 11, it's this great chapter on the heroes of the faith. And the author mentions something, and it's just kind of an interesting little slew of names, and I wanted to bring some of those up. And this is what it says, because he kind of goes through a lot of these people, and then he says, I'm sorry, I almost had it here. And then he says in verse, let's just start in 31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And this is where it gets to. And what more shall I say? I don't have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised. Okay, so he just mentions these names. Well, some of them we're familiar with, but there's this little name, Jephthah. And if you don't really know the Old Testament, you may think, oh, okay, Jephthah. Well, Jephthah is a man who had rough edges. So if you look at Judges chapter 11, we kind of see who this Jephthah really is. And in the very beginning it says, Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. You're not going to get any inheritance in our family, they said, because you are the son of another woman. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him and followed him. Adventurers, and I think in other translations, is ruffians, hooligans. Okay, so here's a man who was the daughter of a prostitute. His dad apparently was not that faithful. So Jephthah is the direct result of unfaithfulness. Okay, directly the result. He was a rough man. Well, the story goes a little later, they start have the Ammonites, and his brothers, even though they didn't like him, knew he was probably the most powerful and smart warrior that they all had. So they all got together and said, hey, would you be willing to lead us in battle against this guy? And Jephthah says, hey, how do I know that once I do this, you're not going to just come back and mess me over? You make me leader of you. Say the words, right? So they had this big formal, moment, and they made Jephthah ruler over them. And Jephthah, sure enough, he gave the king of the Ammonites an ultimatum. And, the Spirit of the Lord, as it says in Judges chapter 11, verse 29, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. Now you think, okay, this is pretty cool story. Rags to riches story, from the very worst product of unfaithfulness, all of a sudden now he's leading Israel. Yes, that's a great story. It could stop there, but it doesn't. See, what we find is that Jephthah was able to be used by God. In fact, there was a moment whenever he made this stupid vow. And he said, God, you know how the deals we make with God. He said, God, if you let me win, then I will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my tent. Well, back in those days, usually the returning leader of a house was greeted by one of his servants. But on this particular day, his daughter showed up. His only girl showed up and said, Daddy. And sure enough, he kept his vow. She even said, Dad, I know I'm never going to marry. Let me just go to the hills and mourn with my friends for 2 months, and then I'll come back. And it said whenever she came back, he did for the Lord what he had vowed. Now, there's been a lot of arguments and documents about, what he did. Did he kill her? Did he sacrifice her? Did he give her to the temple? Or not temple, but to God's service, Levitical service. All the ancient documents, all the documents up to that point, they all just assumed and agreed that he killed her. So human sacrifice was very much frowned upon. We're not even talking, it wasn't even a frown. It was against Torah, against God's law. So here's a man with completely rough edges. He did some other things that were rough, vindictive and not great. I say all this because, firstly, I need you to know that if you have rough edges in your life, okay, great, not great, whatever, but God can still use you. The Spirit of God came upon Jephthah, the son of unfaithfulness, a man who was completely ruled by his anger, his reactions. He was a warrior, and not one of these pure noble warriors that you see in the movies. This was a warrior because he loved to fight. He was good at it, and the only way to get good at fighting is by fighting. But here's a man who, I would say, he made a choice and said, to God, he said, I will lead your people. God put his Spirit on him. He made this initial choice, and God worked through that. Which for me means that it matters less where you came from, and it matters more about the decision you make now and how you choose for your story to continue. So my encouragement today is that if you're walking around, I know I sound like a broken record. If you're walking around thinking that God cannot use you for one reason or another, I need you to realize that He has used the worst of us for the best of things. When you start looking at all the judges in the Old Testament, they continue to get worse and worse and worse. And you look at Samson, and we love to tell our kids about Samson. The problem is Samson was ruled by his lust. He was ruled by his anger. He was ruled by anything else. Now, granted, he had faith, but he killed himself at the end. And I don't mean to paint him in a negative light, but what I'm saying is that he's listed in this chapter too as a man of great faith. But look at his edges. Man, the rough edges. So wherever you are and whoever you are, realize that it matters less how your story has gone up to this point, but it matters way more about what you choose to do right now and how you choose for your story to continue, because God is ready to pour His Spirit out on you. You just have to be willing to let Him do it. So I hope that's helpful today, because your story matters, and your story lived in such a way is worth repeating, even if you have rough edges. All right, I'm going to pray for you, and then I'm going to hang out and kind of read some of the comments and see if we can have a one-sided conversation. Okay? God, thank you for this day. Thanks for our people in this room. I pray that you would be with them, Lord, whether they're watching live or on replay. I pray that you'd help us to all just take that into our consideration, Lord, is that it matters less where we've come from, and it matters way more where we're going. because I believe that you are leading us somewhere. All we have to do is to follow. So help us to make that choice today, to be strong and bold, and to be willing to let our rough edges show, and to let you do all the work you need to smooth us, to help us to become more like you. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning, live at 9. You may notice my light went off right in the middle of all this. I think my battery just died. So, technical difficulties. Let's see who we got here. Away from the bottom. Hey, you're welcome, Jolene. Katina says, I was thinking, I'm people. I have rough edges. You don't have any rough edges, Katina. You're just as sweet as a ray of sunshine. How about that? It's okay. Love this, Groomer. We're all usable. And I would even say, Jessica said, we're all usable in some way. I would say that it's even more than being usable. I would say that we are God's plan A. You know, God's not using us because, you know, something else didn't work. He wants to use you. I mean, he's hoping and waiting to use you. All we have to do is say yes. You know, that's what I love about. That's good. Yeah, we can all be kind of jacked sometimes, can't we? Let's see what else. Hey, if you guys get a chance, wish my son happy birthday today. He's going to be 12 years old. 12 is an exciting age, you know. 12 and everything. 12 and know everything again. But you know what I loved is that, you know, I was telling him as he's watching his little TV show at breakfast, I said, you know, it's okay. Watch your Power Rangers as long as you want, man. You know, because pretty soon there's going to be a lot of things you're going to have to do. A lot of responsibilities. It is as you can. All right. Well, hey, I hope you guys... I know, 12 years old. It's crazy. All right. Hey, thank you guys for participating. And if you're around the Johnson Street area and San Angelo area and you want to visit our class tonight, just kind of look at our Facebook page. I'm going to give you a link that you can join in at 7 p.m. We're going to have a kind of a wrap up to our community Bible experience New Testament reading class, and it's going to be interesting because we're going to do it via Zoom, and the first 100 participants are going to be allowed in, but after that I'm not going to be able to do it, so try to join in if you can. God bless you, and I will see you tomorrow. See you later. Thanks. Bye.